As the world continues to experience a post-global COVID recession and food prices constantly rising, what are small-scale vendors such as street food vendors doing to stay afloat? In Africa, women are known to be the drivers of the informal economy, and street food vending is one of the trade in which they excel. So how does one get started in this craft? What are some of the approaches used in this business in every difficult economic times? On this week's episode of Our Voices, we speak to street food vendors and investigate the ins and outs of the street food vending business in Africa and in the diaspora, where challenges exist and how to overcome them. We'll also discuss how one can grow from a small-scale street food vendor into a large-scale, well-established restaurateur if they choose to do so. Last but not least, we'll try some food from a famous place here in Washington, D.C., right here on our set. Let's get started. Hello, everyone. I'm Oriani Tangishaka. Here with me is my co-host, Siminish Yakoye, and guest host, Palestine Imam. Welcome to this week's show of Our Voices. We are about to discuss street food vending in hard economic times. Now, ladies, when you travel in any countries in the world, do you try street food? And what are your favorites? Puff puff, grilled meat, corn? Which one is it?
Well, I can say I was fortunate enough to travel from East to South Africa, all the way through like Kenya, Tanzania, Zimbabwe, Malawi, Botswana, and I was lucky enough to try their street foods. And my favorite is nyama choma in Tanzania, and also chips mayai.
What is that? Chips mayai.
It's like the potato and egg cooked together.
Okay.
It's I love it.
Yep. My favorite food is shawarma on the street food.
Shawarma.
Yeah,
do you guys remember to tip your vendors?
I am guilty of that. I don't remember tipping street vendors.
Yes, not nice. Well, I love street food, and when I go into a country, I like simple things like grilled corn on the cob, fresh meat, fresh fruits. Well, let's take a look at one of the experiences I recently had in New York. Let's take a look.
Look, guys, no matter how much you think you're class, how much you think you got it going on, when you go to a city, you don't get street food, you have not seen that city. Real food is street food. Look at that. Fresh mangoes, Times Square. I don't gotta eat junk food. I can eat healthy on the road, okay? Mama right here hooked me up with some mangoes. She did it chop quick. And you got hot pepper on it too? Look at that.
I have to try some of that food. But let's begin by looking into the situation here in the U.S., where the inflation has reached a 40-year high, leading to worries of a recession. But it appears small businesses and customers are bearing the brunt of rising prices. For VOA, Keith Kichonki spoke with New York City vendors who are trying to keep prices down and their wheels on the ground.
If you come to America, we're known for food. We love our food.
Few places can match the food diversity in New York City, with restaurants and street food stands on almost every corner.
That's good.
Now, global inflation has triggered skyrocketing food prices in one of the most expensive cities in the world.
Going to get an empanada is going from simply $3 to $4.50 in 2 seconds, and it's crazy, it's ridiculous.
According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Consumer Price Index, food prices have gone up over 10% in the last year, with inflation at a 40-year high. New York City vendors like El Toro Rojo food truck have raised their prices too.
We're quite nervous because we don't want to lose our loyal customers that have been following us for the past 5 years. So we're definitely have to think 3 times before doing it.
From last October to June of this year, the owners of El Toro Rojo have raised the price of a burrito by $1.50 to a total of $13.50, and the price may go up even more.
Every single product you buy, you consume that's food, has to have arrived on a series of boats, trucks, trains. They don't magically appear in a kitchen.
The price of diesel fuel used to transport goods has risen 66% in the last year.
This is not a Biden inflation. This is not a Putin inflation. This is really primarily a COVID inflation.
Dennis Apreza says his street food business has dropped by 15% overall since the pandemic, while wages, taxes, and prices have increased. He's managed to cut costs by reducing portion sizes, storing less, catering larger events, and
Instead of buying it through a third-party distributor, now we're getting up, 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning to go out and buy produce fresh directly from the market to ensure that we're getting the best competitive market price.
experts say COVID lockdowns worldwide disrupted supply and demand, and Russia's war in Ukraine contributed to problems affecting businesses like this.
Okay.
On August 16th, President Biden signed the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022 to lower prescription drug, healthcare, and energy costs. But a University of Pennsylvania study says it will reduce annual inflation by just 0.1% in about 5 years.
We're likely to just have to tough our way through this for the next year or two until prices start to stabilize.
Some experts suggest as prices rise at more expensive sit-down restaurants, vendors like El Toro Rojo may benefit as customers opt for fast casual fare, a change street food vendors invite. Keith Kosinski for VOA News, New York.
Thank you so much, Kosinski, for that story. Now we have in studio with us Mrs. Toyin Ali. She's the owner of the Pudding since 2010. She's a street food vendor here in Washington, D.C.'s historic Eastern Market on Capitol Hill. Some of her food that is very famous is the brown butter bourbon bread pudding. As someone who does both street food and mobile vending truck, she will help us to understand and to help our audience, especially those who are in the diaspora interested in going into this business, to know what it's like and how to stay afloat in tough economic times. Now, Mrs. Ali, thank you so much for being with our voices.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you are a street food vendor here in D.C., and there's some delicious food that we're going to taste later on. But how did you get started in this business as a young woman? And I hear your father is Nigerian, so did he have something to do with it?
He had small to do with it, but no, he had something to do with it. He wasn't a hugely prolific cook, but the items that he did know how to cook, he did very well. But yeah, I started as a farmer's market vendor at Eastern Market, like you mentioned, popping up a tent, putting up tables, and just doing it kind of grassroots style.
Wow.
How long ago was that?
It's tough. It's very difficult. It's probably the hardest way to enter into the food industry, into the restaurant industry, but I think it's the best way to kind of get your feet wet and to learn the business.
Then how did you survive COVID? I mean, that must have been the toughest time.
It was, but honestly, it ended up being very good. People were really supportive of us. I was taking the food truck out. Thank God I had a food truck to take out.
That's right.
A lot of people couldn't switch gears from just restaurant industry to something else. So the fact that we had a food truck was really great. We went to people's neighborhoods in Virginia and all over the area, and we did really well. So we were able to survive things.
Especially when people didn't want to sit in clustered places.
Exactly. So the fact that we could be outside in open air, everybody really enjoyed it.
So what kind of food do you make?
So I do Cajun Creole cuisine, so like Southern comfort food.
Yeah. Now, so customers, I have a question here. So customers like fresh and fresh. How do you make sure that your food is fresh and delicious so that customers can keep coming back?
Yeah. So the great thing about it was that because I was located at a farmer's market, I took advantage of those relationships with other farmers. So I was able to source locally. So we never had a problem with sourcing local vegetables, even during the pandemic. Everybody kind of pulled together and helped each other out. So we were always in a pretty good position.
That is awesome. Yeah. Like you can actually thrive in tough economic times, whereas though some people are really, really struggling. But you know, I mean, I'm sure there were issues of maybe sourcing things that
there were, for sure. There were shipping issues. There were all kinds of issues. But what I will say is that being in kind of a farmer's market community, or even in Union Market where we currently are, it is a community, and all of these other small businesses really do help each other out. So we never felt alone. You know, we became part of all kinds of women's restaurant groups and things like that that really helped us out throughout the pandemic. So,
do you offer any Nigerian local food?
At my home,
What made you go into the Creole type of food? Was that just natural, or was it intentional?
It became intentional because when I was younger, I took a trip to Louisiana, and I took a trip throughout the South. And it was the first time that I recognized that the West African food that I'd been eating for my father and the Southern comfort food that I'd been eating for my mother is actually the same food. It was enslaved Africans trying to recreate, you know, okra soup by making gumbo, for example. You know, so I fell in love with the idea of all of this history on a plate. And so I started to try to recreate those dishes with paying as much attention to history as I possibly could.
That's very
So
nice.
apart from the food you sell on the market, do you make any, like when the people have a parties, do they make
Like catering?
Oh yeah, so we absolutely do catering. We cater all the items on our menu. So we tend to be a hit around Mardi Gras. We tend to be a hit, you know, in the summertime we do po' boys, we do all kinds of stuff as well. But we tend to do mostly Southern comfort food, and we kind of stick to our menu for the catering.
And I hear you also deliver to people's houses, is that?
Yeah, we do. So we, all the DoorDash, Uber Eats, all of those, you know, third-party delivery apps, we do all of those as well.
And that must have been the best for COVID times when people really
It
were
was really
locked
helpful.
into in the house and were ordering in. That must have
Absolutely, and the good thing about it is there was a decrease in the amount that they were charging. So they originally were charging 30%, but during COVID they decreased that to 15% for the service fees for us. So it helped small businesses for sure, but it helped all restaurants, you know, be able to shift to delivery and it not cost them so much. You know?
So what would you say is the most challenging selling food on the street?
Oh my goodness, the most challenging. You know, it's actually not challenging the actual. Let me be careful. It's challenging doing the work. It's physically taxing for sure. But I think that the most challenging part of it is scaling up, because the thing is that it is wonderful to be a street food vendor, don't get me wrong, but it does have a shelf life. You know, it's not a super sustainable you know, job to have, unless you get employees and all of that, and then that's another challenge, hiring people. But really scaling it up, so taking it from a street food vendor to possibly getting a brick and mortar, things like that, you know, tend to be a little bit challenging.
What about weather? Like, you know, there might be rain, there might be snow.
Yeah,
How is that? Is that do you anticipate that when you're calculating throughout the year what's going to happen?
Absolutely, we have ebbs and flows just like any other business, and they're more weather dependent. But what I will say is, I can't remember when we had snowmageddon out here in DC, but I put on my pink snowsuit and I went out to the Eastern Market and I set up. And you know, sometimes you just have to roll with it and keep on going, because people want consistency, right? They want to know that you're going to be out there every Saturday.
Where
and
are
Sunday.
you today?
Yeah, so you have to just tough the weather, and it's definitely a young woman's game.
All right, that's right.
Thank you. We have to take a short break. Don't forget to check us out on social media. We are on Facebook at VOA Africa, on Instagram and Twitter. We are on VOA, Our Voices. We are also on WhatsApp. Our number is US country code +1 202 503 9025. When we return, we will go and look into the art of going consumers wherever they are at the opportune time of the day. We will also have a tasting of Toyin mobile soul food. That's next. Don't go anywhere.
From around the world. Let's go.
Welcome back. You're watching Our Voices. Thank you for being with us. Now, we're discussing food and food vending on the continent and in the diaspora. We're going to go now to Uganda, where it's such a treat to be on the street and to be able to find delicious food on the go. We're going to take a look at Namakula, Mariam, and Jacqueline Mbabazi as they vend their food in the streets of Kampala.
My name is Namakula Mariam, and I'm a street food vendor selling French fries, liver, pilau, beef, and fried chicken. I've been doing this business for 9 years. Food vending is a very lucrative business. With the profits I get here, I've been able to take care of my 3 children, pay school fees for them. Since I'm a single mother, I've been able to take care of my parents as well. Before these tough times, I used to make $105 a day in profits and employ 4 young girls. That was very good business then, but now things are really tight. So bad that it's possible to close a business day with just $5 as profit. Sometimes you contemplate closing down, but when you think about the responsibilities you have as a single mother with parents to take care of, you just hang in there. I don't have so many options since I did not get good education.
My name is Jacqueline Mbabazi, and I'm a street food vendor dealing in katogo, a local delicacy here. Katogo is basically a mixture of matoke with beef, peanuts, liver or beans. You can add some Irish potatoes and rice. I've been doing this business for 30 years. It was set up for me by my husband. It's a good business, though with some challenges. My biggest challenge is the high cost of food items, which makes it hard for me to break even, and customers' purchasing power is very low these days. We don't even make half of what we used to earn before the COVID-19 outbreak.
That's awesome. Wow, the experience of food vending. It's beautiful, it's colorful, and it looks like they're really into it. Now, we are here with Toyin from Puddin, and she has very delicious food that we're going to try to taste in a minute. Toyin, tell us what we have here.
Sure, so we have red beans and rice here. It's slow-cooked red beans with smoked turkey and beef sausage. We have a traditional chicken and beef sausage gumbo with okra, and of course our brown butter bourbon bread pudding smothered in some whipped cream right there.
That, hungry that right there. I see people on social media going crazy with that. How did you come up with that?
You know, it was my mom's recipe that I kind of made a little happy mistake, happy accident, and I served it one day and people were, they reacted in a different way. They had never seen them react with my bread pudding before, so I was like, that's the recipe.
How do you make sure that you find the right recipe for the customers you have?
You know, I think that's very important because I think what you have to do is, like I started at a farmer's market, it's really important to get that time in, the face time with your customers and let them try your products and get feedback from them. You know, sometimes you jump into the restaurant industry and you go full blast into like your own brick and mortar, and it separates you sometimes from your customer. At these farmers markets, you get this face time with your customers that I think is invaluable.
So you usually do on lunchtime?
Yeah, it was lunchtime. We did mostly lunch farmers markets, but we also did, like, you know, Eastern market was kind of a morning till afternoon farmers market, but yeah, mostly lunch.
So which one goes so fast?
I'm going to actually try to taste some of this delicious food. And Toyin, as we get into your food right now, but I also want to know, you know, there are tough times. I mean, you talked about thriving during COVID, but you also had your food truck broken into. How was that experience?
You know, how I look at things like that is that it's absolutely part of the job. You know, like if you have a car, it's going to get broken into. It's gonna need maintenance. It's going to need care. So I don't let things like that get me down. What I will say is a bigger challenge for me in the past has been getting financing as a small business, as a woman of color, securing, you know, capital to build out a kitchen. In 2017, I was able to purchase a space in Capitol Heights, which is in the DMV area, and I was able to build that space out into a commercial kitchen for myself. It's 3,000 square feet. It's amazing. It's my baby. You know, I love it. But it was tough getting to the point where I was able to secure financing to purchase the building and then also to renovate it. So some of the things I talk about with other small business owners are just making access to capital a lot easier for us, you know, because you know, I see other people and I feel like they seem to sprint to the finish line, and I feel like we tend to have a lot of hurdles along the way. So having access to capital has been, you know, very important to me.
So as we talked about in the beginning of the show, scaling up from food truck to a restaurant, is that a scary process or is it really doable?
Yeah, because we really, this is so
delicious.
This has to be in a restaurant. We want this to be sustainable, and you say sustainability is one of the issues with this business.
Yeah, and a lot of women really start out wanting to do small business because maybe that's the means they have. And on the continent, really women on the street, they're really selling very delicious food. And how can that transfer into an actual large-scale restaurant?
Yeah, I think that everybody has their own story and their own journey, but really and truly taking it in steps rather than, you know, skipping steps or, you know, taking leaps and bounds. I think it's very important to, I started at a farmer's market, right? Tent tables, like I said. The next thing I did was I got a food truck, you know, and I got comfortable with that. And I felt like, okay, as soon as the business started telling me that we needed to have an additional level, the demand was there, then I pushed for the next thing. I didn't push because I so badly wanted my own restaurant, you know, like I did it because it was busy enough, there was enough positive feedback from customers that I felt like I could push to that next level. So I think taking the steps that are comfortable for you as a business owner. If, you know, I have some friends that are street food vendors and that's where they're comfortable, and I think that's where they will always exist. And there's nothing wrong with that either. That's awesome, you know, because it can be, you know, you can make it sustainable for yourself. But if you really do want to push on to that next level, I think it's very important to take the steps that feel comfortable to you.
So
you know?
how's the recovery process now? After the COVID, how the economy is
so unfortunately, you know, we did have to close down our Capitol Heights carryout location. And then we also had to get rid of one of our food trucks because it just wasn't sustainable to have 2 food trucks anymore. But what we have done is kind of refocus our attention to our Union Market location. And we've done incredibly well. Sometimes, you know, you have your hands in everything and you think that's a good thing to be all over the city or all over the map. But really and truly, if you just focus on one thing, you can make that you know, more successful than all of those other things put together. So we do currently, you know, we have the food truck still, and I still take it out for events and catering and things like that. But we really have kind of focused in on our Union Market location.
Now, what advice do you have for young women watching you and thinking that could be me? I could start a food truck, I could start a stand, I can get started. What are some of the basic things that they should know? And then, of course, you'll let us know maybe some of the tips you have for online support, because I did see on your Instagram giving some tips on how people can support food vendors online.
Absolutely. So I think the most important bit of advice that I could give any young person that wants to get into the food industry is to definitely start small. You know, and I think there's a lot of respect there because, like I said before, start small, work closely with your customer, get that feedback from them so that you can know how to improve your product. My products weren't like this when I first started. You know, I definitely had to work on them and improve them and listen to customers and hear some criticism that was hard for me to hear.
Like
but,
what?
Oh,
more salt.
It's embarrassing.
You're not there anymore. Now
exactly, I've ascended. So
like the bread pudding was not sweet enough.
Right. You know, just little things that I, you know, rather than taking it personal, I decided let me actually listen to this feedback and make the necessary changes.
So not being discouraged by criticism is one of the things.
Exactly. And you know, also being careful with criticism too. Just because somebody says something, it's not all true, you know. But having a good team around you that doesn't tell you everything that you want to hear, obviously. You know, things like that are really good. But yeah, absolutely.
Do you get tempted on adding more to your menu, or you just want to stick with what you have?
Actually, another good point. I think that
especially Nigerian,
I get tempted. Believe me, you know, we have this kitchen that I just play in, and I get to come up with all these recipes, and it is very tempting to add more things to the menu, but really and truly it is important to specialize and figure out what it is that you're very good at and stick to those things and kind of resist the urge to do everything, because as a small business it's very difficult to do a lot of different things because your profit margins are already very low, and you start doing everything, then you can't control things as much. So.
And when you look at the customers, do they like the food they know, or they like to try new ones?
Oh, that's a tough one. It just depends on the person. We've noticed that we do have to educate the customer on some of our food products, because being kind of in the Northeast, people don't quite know what grits are or gumbo or things like that. So we do a lot of educating a lot of times. We sell a lot of books at our stand as well, kind of some original Black cookbooks, things like that.
And you're also very, I saw you have a strong presence on social media in your Instagram pages.
Yeah,
so you make use of social media.
What are the tips you have that we can support?
Absolutely. I think it's very important. Honestly, I don't do that great on social media. That's one of the areas that I can work on myself, but it's important to have a presence on social media and to make sure that people know your product. Marketing is incredibly important. So getting it out there as much as possible, talking to people, getting video reviews and reactions from customers is really, really important. But just putting yourself out there as much as possible and putting your product out there, and you have to be your own advocate, you have to be your own marketing person, you have to be your own cheerleader. So,
oh man, you have to be, for such kind of delicious food, you have to be the cheerleader.
Right. That's awesome. I'm definitely going to try that pudding, because when I look at social media, I think something that people are seeing on social media, especially young people, they're going to come for it.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. We encourage everybody to try it. Bread pudding is one of those desserts. It's not very popular, but if you try ours.
Yeah. Yeah, like you said, trying the grits. I'm not sure about the grits. I saw grits with shrimps, so I'm going to have to be educated on that.
You already did that.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have to end it here so we can continue tasting this very delicious food from Toyin, who is the owner of Puddin', and a well-known food truck here in Washington, D.C. It's a historic Eastern Market on Capitol Hill. On behalf of my colleagues on VOA Our Voices, thank you, and everyone at VOA, thank you so much for watching. Have a good day.